So with that note, I'm actually going to turn to our Q&A because we do have some technology related questions in there. I'll leave the big question actually till the end about how will the drone impact the future. We'll use that question to wrap up today's session. But there's one question specifically about drone on environment. And Armin, I believe you mentioned that was one of the primary objectives of Drone Delivery Canada is to improve, or to reduce the impact on our environment. So I'll actually take that question to you as what do you see about the effects of drone on environment?
I mean, that's the idea, right? I mean, the idea is to reduce our carbon footprint in any, really in any industry. So because we're operating under drones that are electric, you're actually removing the vehicles. And I'll give you an example. I know there was a couple of questions about the benefits of drones, and I'll kind of tie in the two together. So say, for example, you have, you have trucks that are delivering high value goods, whether it's from warehouse to warehouse, warehouse to distribution centers. I know logistic companies today that use large 50-foot trucks to deliver 3 small packages, right? So imagine that truck on the road, and there's thousands of these across the nation. It's just not 1 or 2, there's thousands of them. So if you remove those trucks and you're delivering just a few items within, I would say the and then there was another question about cargo, and I think we have that information publicly for our drones in terms of the smallest can carry up to 10 pounds, 25 pounds for the medium, and up to 200 pounds. So imagine those small value items in a drone. 10 pounds is still pretty heavy for small packages. Small packages are usually, I don't know, maybe 5, 6, 7 pounds, right? So you can use that drone to remove that truck from the current Canadian ecosystem, and imagine the impact that you'll have on CO2 levels by using the drone that's fully electric. Not only that, but you're also removing the possible accident of that truck, whether it's on a road or highway. So there's a lot of factors behind the way we kind of do our case studies and how we approach it on the business side, because we see that potential of drones scaling upwards and having multiple of them flying around, going back and forth and delivering these small packaged goods. But yeah, I mean, essentially, we want to reduce our CO2 carbon footprint, and this is where there's a value proposition of the usage of drones to go and tackle that. And I mean, I think as a country, we have ESG mandates that we need to meet. So this is one way, I would say, as a first step to go and, see which industry. And I think logistics is one, as somebody asked, benefits, healthcare is another one. So especially in healthcare where, there's trucks that are trying to provide vaccinations, medication, anything to do with healthcare, you can go and provide it to remote environments that normally, A, you don't have access, or B, if you do, the frequency is very low and you're not getting there enough. So this is where the drone technology comes in and bridges that gap.
Thank you, Armin. While we move on with the discussion, I'm just going to launch our second poll there, get a feel from the audience what drone technologies or specific industry sectors that interest you. And while that one is up, I just want to tie a couple of the other Q&A questions. So Armin did touch a little bit. There was a question on remote location, drone technology for remote locations. So the simple answer is yes, drone technology does exist in very remote locations. And it really comes down to what is being used. So for example, Drone Delivery Canada has done great projects to deliver to remote, especially Aboriginal communities in remote locations. There are also from Chris' perspective in remote locations for mapping, that was actually a very interesting question I wanted to mention, because mapping or survey in urban locations where there are benchmarks, there are references, and easily accessible locations it's easier to achieve. But remote locations is always challenging. So that's the one thing, when Chris mentioned about seeing drone solutions integrating more with the overall, GIS or geomatics system, that's what we like to see from from a solutions perspective as well. It's not just the drones going out to fly, but it's that data coming back, being processed and being able to integrate with a larger system like Esri, like ArcGIS, or any of the mapping systems out there. So when people look at the data, they can actually make the useful analytical decisions and deliver value from there. So that answers our remote location question. Let me just see our Q&A. There was one question still on the regulations regarding the drone itself. So regulations for drone itself, currently Transport Canada has a list. So if you look at the official list from Transport Canada, it tells you what category the drone falls under. And depending on the category, the drone's allowed to do basically certain risk environments. That's the current regulation on drone itself. And from a pilot perspective, we have to register our drones to get a drone registration number. That's almost like your vehicle license plate. It has to be visibly displayed on the drone when you're flying it as well. And looking forward, the one thing we didn't talk about is the Beyond Visual Line of Sight license, which is coming into force or proposed to come into force next fall. That's going to impact the Canadian drone industry quite a bit, because currently it's very difficult to get what we call Beyond Visual Line of Sight, BVLOS, certificate from Transport Canada. But from next fall, there's going to be a new license added to the existing licensing system. So you need to take a recognized course and pass the Beyond Visual Line of Sight exam. At that point, your pilot license would have a Beyond Visual Line of Sight rating. And there will be specific conditions applying to the Beyond Visual Line of Sight environment. And if you can meet all those requirements and you have your pilot rating, then you can fly Beyond Visual Line of Sight without having to go through a really long regulation process of getting specialty permit. So that's going to be a big step for the industry to start, pushing the technologies, to start doing a lot more delivery, remote sensing, all of those bigger technologies and newer technologies we're looking forward to. Okay, looks like we've gotten through all the Q&A questions. And let me also just quickly share the poll results. It's interesting to see that drones for video and photography still ranks the highest. I mean, from technology perspective, we always like to say all drones are for some kind of image capture to a degree. Either it's for detect and avoidance, either it's for post data analytics. It's ultimately some kind of image sensor on the drone that's capturing the pictures or the video feedback to help with the post processing. And you can choose to use it for real estate, for video, for marketing, or you can choose it for mapping and survey. So thanks for everyone who's participated. And as I mentioned, I left the last question there for everyone to kind of contribute, which is, what do you see, or how do you see drone technologies impacting the future? I'm actually going to start with Trevor, because I know Trevor has to leave shortly. So I'll go around our panelists to ask for what's your take on drone technologies impacting our future. And Trevor, we'll start with you.
Well, I guess kind of one thing that is top of mind is around the transportation logistics piece. Being based in Vancouver, obviously the recent flooding and landslides and the waste cutoff communities has really emphasized the vulnerability, I think, of kind of critical supply chains and a sort of supply chain management. So I'm curious on the physical applications, and I think the majority of my work is around labor market implications. So whether that's kind of directly in terms of kind of drone training, but also kind of seeing how kind of efficiencies will impact kind of other adjacent, I think, industries. And in terms of how that might kind of disrupt employment there, I think will be worth following in the future. But yeah, unfortunately, I do have to run soon. But thank you so much for having me here today. It's been a great conversation with everyone today. Very informative, and I hope to connect in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Trevor. And next up is Amanda. So Amanda, especially with Seneca's program, what do you see the future of drones?
Well, my ideal wish list is that our graduates will, as we just learned from Trevor too, impact other industries. How does that unfold in an ethically and safe way? Also, looking at the communication between industries. So we have tech folks who, will understand the flight portion, but also being able to speak the same language within business. And so having that synergy so that we're able to provide solutions to businesses, industries across the board. So that's my ideal situation for our graduates. And I know that we can do it. So I'm really excited here. I see some folks reaching out already talking about future synergies. So thank you for having me.
Thank you, Amanda. And Chris, where do you see drone technologies going to?
Well, from the mapping and GIS perspective, I like Amanda's line. My wish list, my desire would be that drones can become an operational extension of the information system that is a GIS. So the same way that we sort of treat IoT sensors, traffic cameras, those sorts of things. I'd like all of our discussion around safety and privacy. Let's assume we solve all those problems. Operationally, and the benefits from being able to just go out there in near real time and be able to see what is going on with that flood or that fire or that change in my community or that change in my mining operation, and to be able to bring that in and analyze that in the context of existing data and in the context of other sensors is something that that's kind of the holy grail for us, is to see drones really be that operational extension of our geographic information system.
Thank you, Chris. That's a pretty big vision. Takes and that near real time is always the challenge, because it's one thing to bring back the data, take your time to process. It's another thing to say having almost a near real time. That's one of the main goals from public safety. They definitely like to have that near real time situation awareness and management. Okay, and Armin, what's the main vision, and what do you see the impact of drone in our future? And also, obviously with Drone Delivery Canada already leading the industry, where do you see all of that fitting in with Drone Delivery Canada as well?
I appreciate that, Yifei. So I mean, look, I think the first thing that my wife says to me, when am I going to get a pizza delivered in front of my house? So that's the $1 million question that everybody asks me also. Unfortunately, we're still a ways away, but I mean, look, using drones is I think Chris touched base about efficiencies. It's going to help efficiencies with businesses. I think for me, the most beneficial part of it, and Trevor touched base, is really on the healthcare side. I think drones can really jump in and provide, especially remote environments, remote communities that are underserved right now. This is where I believe there's tremendous benefit and value, because there are areas in Canada that, we don't necessarily, provide goods and services. And this is where we need to go and provide those goods and services to, and I would say, probably, I'm referring mostly, I mean, it could be island communities, remote communities, but it's also, I was talking more on the north side of Canada, the Indigenous communities that necessarily don't have all the benefits that we get here, more on the southern part of Canada at the border of the US. So this is where I think drones are going to be able to tackle those areas. They're going to be able to connect communities to larger urban cities, and we're going to be able to provide certain products and services that normally they don't necessarily have access to. So I think that's where the future lies. And of course, there's benefits to companies using it as a complement. But eventually, I think that complement will change, and I think it'll become part of their core business, where they're going to start pulling away their current business model and then start implementing drones in their plans. And maybe eventually we'll get that pizza at our door.
Yeah, and maybe my Amazon delivery as well.
Yeah. Well, before Amazon comes and does it in Canada, we'll be there to jump on that.
Sounds good. Before turning back to Kelly and Ryan, I'll also share a little bit on my end. So I know there's a lot of challenges jumping through regulations and safety concerns, and also technologies. So the one thing I learned from years in the drone industry is the drone industry right now is probably the second next to the Internet of Things that's acting as a hub of technologies that really connects the variety of different industries, infrastructure, regulation, different levels of government agencies all together. So on a daily level, for example, from delivery perspective, people think, how hard can it be? You're giving the drone 2 GPS sets, one start point and one end point, and it just flies direct line. How hard can it be? But now we're also looking at integrating that into the 5G network, integrating that for precise precision locating, because when we say GPS, we think there's just one set of GPS, but when we look at from navigation perspective, it's actually very different, especially to achieve accuracy and precision. So I really love to see, first of all, I love to see that highway in the sky. So it's not just for general aviation, right? There needs to be the highway sky, the lower level designed specifically for drones. So at least we have our place in the sky. And then from there, we can really look further into the different tiers of getting the drone operations more safely and effectively, ultimately almost in every aspect of our life. And it's not going to be everyone looking at it to say, oh, I didn't know drones could do that. I really like to see, different drone technologies becoming our day-to-day lives. We're used to it, so it doesn't come as a surprise anymore. So on that note, I'll turn it back to Kelly and Ryan. Maybe as a final note, you guys could share with us what's your vision as well.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for putting this together for us, Yifei, and thank you to our panelists for joining today and sharing your information. My vision for drones, for those of you that remember the Jetsons commercial or cartoon, I'm starting to see some of that come to life right now. I know there's actually things called, I think, the Jetson right now. I'm not certain I'm willing to get in there and fly around at this point, but it is exciting and scary at the same time to see what is coming down the pipeline. We are working on the next future of technology series, probably will be taking place in the end of January, early February, and we're looking at talking about property technologies and continuing on with some of these discussions. Thank you very much to everybody taking the time. Check us out at techconnex.ca and join us for a complimentary peer group.